Everybody, welcome to this week's Edu-Paint, or this kind of month's Edu-Paint, this week's Edu-Paint. I do it every other week in case you don't know, which is why I'm not quite sure on how to phrase that. But if you're not familiar with what we're doing tonight is the Edu-Paint. This is the every other week I do something a little bit more educational, a little bit more directly trying to help those getting started in painting. The past few weeks we've covered things like paint types, brushes, tools you need to get going, prepping a miniature for painting, etc. And then this week we have our one primed. This has been put on the back burner a little bit because a couple of people have asked to go over other things like brushes first. So now we got this thing going, and what we're going to do today is just going to base coat the mini, and then if time allows, we're going to do some washes. I already have all my colors set out here. Don't be intimidated by all these colors. These are all the colors we're going to use to paint the entire thing. I just picked them out ahead of time. I am recording this live for those viewing this on YouTube. I'm going to try to time-lapse a couple things in here to shorten it up for you guys on the YouTube, so it's not a huge slog. But get through all the shop keeping. Once again, we are sponsored by BarthelsMarvels. BarthelsMarvels, all one word, on the Instagram and the Etsy's. They are handmade goods for your adventuring life. He is a licensed 3D printer for Patreons such as Yasashi Kyojin, Print and Paint Miniatures, Lord of the Print, and more. Lance and his family are great cool people. They will also be more than happy to help you out if you want to do things like commissions or Hero Forge miniatures. And it's a really great job he does and sends them out right away. And he gives you stickers, and everybody loves stickers. Speaking of stickers, we have stickers for Paint Club and my own Mage Brush logo sticker. So if you want any of these, please DM me and I'd be more than happy to send you out some. I sent some pile out last week to UK, Canada, and to a few friends in the States. If you're already with us watching, you're already on the Twitches. Please go ahead and hit subscribe and the little bell, that way you know when I am going live. If you want to DM me or follow me personally, Mage Brush is where you can find me on the Instagrams. I also try to post within the next day or so videos on YouTube. Sometimes they're cut down, sometimes they're time lapsed, just for sake of it not being like an hour-long video or so. But I do post things on YouTube, and then I also have a fun Discord of great painters that can be also more of a help for people just getting started, or random questions or opinions or whatever have you. So please feel free to check any of these out. And like I said, if you're on the YouTube or Twitch, please hit subscribe. It'll help me out. And then also hit the little bell while you're at it. That way you're alerted for when things get going live here. So this boy is I don't know if you can't really see it right now because of the white. It is a chain rasp poured from Games Workshop. In the past weeks, and other videos, we cut the mini out, showed how to do that, showing what tools you're going to need. Did a bunch of the gap fill stuff and primed it using Army Painter white. Just because I used Army Painter doesn't mean you can't use things like Tamiya or Vallejo or Citadel or whatever. I happen to have Tamiya and Army Painter right now in white, so that's what I used. So tonight for brushes, you can use kind of whatever you want for basing brushes. Think of this as a coloring book, and you're going to paint inside the lines. I like, depending on the miniature, using, like we talked about last week, and you've heard me before, using filbert brushes. These are generally flat, but have a rounded top. I enjoy using these, but you can use a regular round brush as well. Something like this, when you get with little details like the chain, just make sure you got something that has a decent point. I use a 1 or a 0, but again, as I always say, there's no real wrong answer. It's whatever's comfortable for you with your tools. Other than that, just a water pot, which is hiding behind my little my little self right here, a little water pot. I use a paint puck in it, and then your base colors. For the base colors, we're literally going to be using 6 colors. I have a couple Game Color colors, and then this one from Citadel I really enjoy called Iron Warriors. And then we have a couple of a metal corrosion rust type technical stuff that we can use later, and then we're going to work our way up to dry brushing, which is one of the things I wanted to talk about too. Just because I work this way doesn't mean it's the correct way. It doesn't mean it's the incorrect way. Some people work with starting with their lightest colors and glaze in shadows. That's awesome and that's fine. Some people start with the medium colors and then glaze in their shadows and dry brush in their highlights. That's also fine. I learned from other videos and other painters doing the darker color first and then doing highlights and your washes and building up to your lights. It's just how I learned, so this is how I'm sharing it to you guys. But like I said, it's not the only way to accomplish these looks, and it's not necessarily the incorrect or the correct way to do it. It's just a way to do it. Not to get all Bob Rossy, but it's your little world. Do whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I know I keep repeating that, and I'm sorry if you get a little agitated by that, but it's truly the truth. You can start with the lights and go work your way dark. There's a leather technique that I saw done by somebody else that's exactly how they start. They start with the lightest color and then they move their way darker, and it gets a really cool leather result. Could I do it another way? Yeah, and I have, and it works. So that's the way we're going to do this today, is we're going to go from the darkest colors and moving our way light. So let's dive on in. First things first here, I'm going to start with the dark cloak here on the top. My plan of action is to do, lighter green, white, kind of like the box picture. I'm pretty much following the box. So I'm going to actually start with Game Color Heavy Charcoal. I'll run it through my mixer real quick. And again, for those that have been watching paint and hang and whatnot, you probably also know by now I use Airbrush Flow Improver. Again, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just what I use. You can use regular water. I just caution, pay attention to your water mixture, because you can over thin and then you're basically working with a glaze instead of a paint. So, like the old ad says, a little dab will do you. I like the Flow Improver because it's basically, this is another video we're going to go into later in life of the differences and how much to add and everything else. But the Flow Improver, just in short, is basically the same thing as the binding agent in the paint itself. And it doesn't break up the particles as much. And you know what? With all of this going on, I don't think I'm going to use any filberts. I think I'm going to use the #1 Raphael. So I got something with a decent little point to it. This is an older brush, so I'm probably going to swap it out later. But again, we're just basing. And then it's kind of like a coloring book when you're a kid after that point. I hold my brush like this just so I can steady myself. I know some people might, say like, oh, I don't have steady hands. I don't have steady hands. Fine. You can still paint. Another trick you can do when you're getting to something like this where there's an edge, you can kind of just use the side of your brush and it'll go right off the edge, and then you're fine. What I have found greatly helps me over time is learning different tricks of angles to hold your brush. Brush pressure is a big one, and also angling the mini around. Like, just, you'll see I constantly, whoa, I just shook everything. I am so sorry. I'm constantly rolling the miniature around so I can ensure I get every point. one color done. What do we want to do next? I want to do this next because I'm super excited to try this. I ordered this paint just for these minis, just for you guys, so it feels special. This is Game Color 72.096 Verdigris. This is not to be confused with the Verdigris effect paint. There is a Verdigris effect paint. It is different. Very different. The effect paints and the paints are very, very different. This is the first time I'm using this. thin coats will also help you get smoother finish on your paint. And you want to make sure everything is super dry before you move on, because otherwise you're going to get streaks, you're going to get clumping, you're going to get all kinds of things there. So yeah, so while that's doing a little bit of drying, I'll tell you the game plan here. The game plan here is to take that verdigris paint right here, which again is very different from this. This is more like a gel for doing metal effects. This is a straight paint. Plan is to take this, and then we're going to dry brush in a bunch of white on top of it. We're going to do metal on the chains with some typhus corrosion from Citadel, which is really cool. There's like an aggregate in here. It's like a rust, dark dried rust. It's very similar to the dried rust effect from Vallejo, but typhus corrosion has aggregate in it, so it looks more grimy, like the metal is in the ground and it came out. And then we're going to hit it with a little bit of the new rust effects, as well as a lighter silver color for like chipping and that kind of stuff. We're also going to be using a variety of washes. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again, like, you don't need all these different washes. You can totally get by with just an Agrax Earthshade or like a umber wash, like anything ground colored, like a brown and a black. If you're just starting out, you don't need to have everything. It's not a requirement. I started out just using black, and it was awesome, and I loved it. I just slowly acquired everything else over time. Colors down, and we have 4 more to go. So let's move on to this ground color. So for the ground color, I'm literally using Earth from Vallejo Game Color. The majority of my stuff is going to be Vallejo Game Color. If you're not familiar with my painting or whatever, Vallejo is one of the best paints in my mind. Also one of the most cost-effective, I think. It's also what's really available to me. I either have Games Workshop available to me, or I have Vallejo. I really like Vallejo. So this is 72.062, literally Earth or Terra. Again, a couple drops of airflow improver. Stir it up. And again, I use a dry palette. You can use a wet palette. If you're using a wet palette, you're not going to want to use the flow improver. So this, I'm going to actually switch and use my filbert. And this is why I like the filbert. You can get a bunch of paint loaded up. And go across the piece in pretty much one shot. Now I primed this in white because I knew I was going to be using this lighter green, and whatever you start with for a primer is what you're going to have to be painting over, quite honestly and obviously, but some colors are harder to go over others. Why we did this in white. You can tell I'm not doing the edge. You can edge these in whatever you want. I like edging in a gloss black. I know the game color thing is to edge in your darkest or medium tone ground color, but I don't necessarily subscribe to that. So I'm gonna do what I want. And it's something I do on all my miniatures, just so when I throw them all on the table, there's that level of consistency. And again, you don't have to do it. You can do whatever you want. There's no wrong way of really painting. So while that brown dries a little bit, let's move to a different brown. I'm going to use Game Color 45 Charred Brown. I'm going to use this for the wooden handle on the... This guy in particular has a hatchet or an axe, battle axe. I'm going to use this color so it's a little bit more of like a rotting brown. I'm not going to water this one down because in my experience, this paint, this color in particular, is already pretty well thinned out of the pot. so at this point, you can see we have the verdigris along the ghostly entrails, I guess you would call it. I don't know the technical term there. We have the dark brown on the handle of the hatchet or the axe. We have the heavy charcoal on his mantle. And then we have our earth brown on the ground here. So the next color I think I'm going to do is I'm going to start with bone white for the bones. So this is 72.034 if you're keeping track of Vallejo, bone white.
So now we have our
bone done, and the only other base color we need to do at this point is our silver. In this instance, I'm going to use Citadel Iron Warriors. This is a silver color that I really enjoy. The only other one I've enjoyed other than this one is a Reaper paint I got from my asset drop box. Like adamantine, I think it is. It's a really dark, almost like black metallic, which is awesome. I used it on some cannons a few weeks ago. Now when I transferred this, I already added a bunch of flow improver, so I know it's already pretty well thin. So what we're going to do with this bad boy, we can go over this axe handle. Or not the handle. Axe head. And again, because it's white, I find metallics going over black look the best. But it's not necessary. You don't have to do it that way. And again, we're just trying to be very careful around the edges. Stay inside the lines. Just like when you were a kid and you had a coloring book. And really start paying attention to, especially if you're beginner, start paying attention to your brush pressure. And don't jab at things with the point. Really use the edge of your brush. You want to, brushes are made to go a certain direction. They're made to go from one direction to another. talking about earlier with like brush pressure, like doing gentle little details like this, you don't have to hammer on your brush. You could take a couple swipes at it with a really light pressure and really get into certain areas. Just kind of just apply a little bit of paint at a time. Because if you hammer in there, you might get paint in a place you don't want. And then like in the case of like these bones, it's gonna be really pain in the butt to go over this really dark silver with a really light color. There we have it, folks. Here's your base colors. Verdigris on the little flary bits, earth on the ground, beastly brown on the handle, iron warriors on all the metal, bone white on the bones, and there's iron warriors on the metals. Bonus hour washes. I am going to use Agrax Earthshade on the ground, and again, like I said earlier, you don't need a mess load of washes to have a good paint job. You can go a long way with just the brown and black. Brush I want to use fell on the floor. And with this, I always find it a little... I kind of use the dry brushing method and go like against the grain, because then it'll leave the wash in the recesses. Now some people don't like washes because they get what they call coffee stains, which is true. So like in this instance, if you have too much, like right there, I just dried out my brush, okay? And you can just touch it and it'll wick away some of that excess. Now it's gone. Other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a little bit of a watered down green wash. Drop of this green wash, and then I'm gonna take, I know this might be intense. I keep water in a dropper bottle. You don't have to. I'm gonna do 2 drops. 1, 2. Because I want to thin out the greens. I don't want it to be as intense. And I'm gonna use, come back to my number 1 brush here. By number 1, I mean the size. I'm watering this down, and I just want to go over the verdigris color. Again, if you see, like, I'm going against the grain and it helps cool some of that stuff in there. I don't want to do a heavy amount of this because I don't want it to be super intense, which is why I watered it down. I just want it to exist. I want to have that other color exist. The metal, I'm going to do Nuln Oil. So again, I'm taking my smaller brush, round brush, taking a little bit. I'm just going to go right over the metal, and what this, you can't really tell on the axe there, but watch on like the chain. What it does is it sits in the recesses and really makes stuff like the chains pop out better. And sits like right in the keyhole. Shade, I'm going to go over the brown too. When using ink, should I use a darker ink or watered down color similar to base color? I go opposite. If I had a red green, I think it depends. Inks will turn around, so inks will tint everything. They will legitimately tint everything. Think of it like a translucent paint. So like there's a leather technique that I've done in the past where I use a brown ink and it tints all these different colors of tans and everything else to be the same tonal value. So if that's your goal, an ink will be good. If you water down a regular color, it'll act more like a glaze. You can get a similar effect, but it won't be as intense. In fact, I actually water down a lot of my inks. And as far as similar to the base color, it depends on what your goal is. If you're doing like shadows, some people always do shadows in like a bluish color, because shadows are technically not always black. Shadows are a blue in color. I'm just trying to also make sure I'm understanding your question here. Water down colors. Mid-green colors, should I go darker green or sage blue? Yeah, so a darker green or a blue I think would depend on your goal. If you are going to be like a shadow, maybe go with more of a blue. If you were looking to, how can I put this? So if you're going to just be like a darker tone on like, say like a frog skin or something, and you're just looking to like have that skin be like kind of like blotchy and weird, then yeah, you could totally go with a darker green. I think it thoroughly depends on what your goal for the piece is. Like what are you trying to achieve with your question here? So I'm not like glossing over your question or seeming like I'm ignoring your question, because I really want to answer it. I also want to ensure that I'm understanding it fully. I'm going with the green here, for example, just because I want to intensify that green color in the verdigris. Because the verdigris is kind of like that blue. It's like a pastel blue, and I'm using the green to kind of get it some portions to, like in the shadowy portions, to get to a little bit more of a teal color. Especially in like the shadows here, which you could do in this instance. I could water down a regular paint color and use it like a glaze. I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm just using a wash as my starting point. I'm trying to make the details of a dress and skin of green skin on a figure. Making her for dancing or look like an Orion say, oh, that's cool. The base color I want. Looking good so far. The practice piece. So I would say if you're doing skin, the skin I might go with a darker of the same color. If you're doing like the dress and it's gonna be like the shadows between ruffles, try a blue. Try a glazed blue. I think Redgrass Games put out a little PDF thing a little bit ago, where I think it's like 4 drops of water, 3 drops of water to a drop of paint to get a good glaze going. That's what I would try. Or you could try a blue wash and just see what happens. Blue wash on green actually looks really cool. I've done blue wash on a, was it Yanti in D&D, where it's like the snake people. I did a nice green and then I did a blue wash, and it looks very, very cool. This, because the verdigris is already kind of a blue, I'm going the opposite to get this kind of, really hard to tell because it's bright, to get this more of a teal color going on. Yeah, so there we have it though, is the base colors with washes. The one thing I didn't wash, you might ask, well, how come you didn't wash the cloak? Well, because the cloak I'm going to do with blue. I'm going to do the cloak, or the, whatever you want to call this piece, I'm going to do it in blue. And I'm going to do, before I do that, I want to, so kind of like we were just talking about, the question there about dark or light or using inks, I want to use this basalt gray on top of this, and then I want to do the blue so it kind of acts like an ink and dyes the grays all to this blue color. So it's that constant like ethereal kind of a thing happening. But yeah, that's kind of it there. So if there are any other questions, you got the paint shaker I got? Nice. It's totally worth it. So I don't know if you saw for my paint hang last Monday, but I have a color, it's Jade, I think, in Vallejo game color, and people were like, oh yeah, it's not really working right, you got a bad pot. I started on that thing for a little bit, and now the paint's like brand new. So, I mean, if you have the means, I highly suggest it. Yeah, so maybe you can see it better here. This is where we're at. I don't know if it's going to autofocus. Maybe not, but this is where we're at. With our base color and wash completely done. We've been going at this for about an hour. and we're done. And you know what? Quite frankly, if you satisfied, you can throw this on your table and impress your friends. But we're going to take it a step farther next time. So in 2 weeks, we're going to do come back and we're going to do the rest of this. We're going to do all the dry brushing, and we're going to do the effect paint and just finish this off to put it on the table. It'll be really, really awesome. I've gotten to the point where I can do minis like these in 2 hours. So we're an hour in, another hour lesson, and we can get this right onto the table. And if it takes you longer, that's fine. Take as much time as you want. I've gotten proficient over doing this in the past couple years. I've gotten decently proficient to move quickly. So that's what we're gonna do for next time. So just shopkeeping again. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe to here, you're viewing here on Twitch live, and also hit the little bell to let you know that things are going live and let you alerts. Same with the YouTube. I try to post everything within the next day or two onto YouTube, and again, hit subscribe and the bell there. Please also follow me on Instagram here, and please message me at any given time. If you have questions, I'd be more than happy to help you out. And then also, if you want to join the Discord, please let me know. So for those viewing on YouTube, this is where I'm going to end the video there. I'm going to hang out for a little bit further, though, for those on Twitch to answer questions. So for the YouTubers,